field of longevity. So Ilia Stambler is a chief science officer of Vetek, Seniority Association in Israel. If I'm not wrong, please correct Ilia. It's a senior citizen movement in Israel. He received his PhD from Department of Science and Technology from Bar Ilan University, Israel. His research is majorly focused on historical and social implication of aging and life extension research. He's also involved in mathematical modeling of aging and related disease. He published recently a book, A History of Life Extensionism in the 20th Century and Longevity Promotion, a multidisciplinary perspective. He's actively involved in advocacy for aging and longevity research, like longevityforall.org, and chair of Israeli Longevity Alliance and executive committee member of International Society of Aging and Disease, as well as International Longevity Alliance. He wrote several papers on aging, disease, cancer detection, prevention, current aging science, and global aging, frontier in genetics, etc. So Ilia, I would like to invite you for your talk, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Avinash. It is always a pleasure to be here. Let me share my slide.
We cannot hear you, Ilia.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, now. Okay, so my topic, kind of a continuation of the previous topic. We have been advocating for increasing public support for health and longevity everywhere, also in India, because this is a global topic, and research does need public support. It cannot exist without it, without funding, without people being interested. Very crucial part of the longevity. The main premise of longevity advocacy is that if we are able to intervene into degenerative aging processes, we will be able to on not just one disease or symptom, but multiple aging-related diseases, so-called age-related multimorbidity. And in this way, we can promote the healthy and productive longevity for the entire population. And also, of course, as a side effect, improve the economic situation, the social welfare situation. All comes from intervention into the aging process. Our main point that we try to advocate, and now this point comes to ever stronger focus with the COVID-19 crisis. We see that elderly are the most vulnerable population. They're the people who mostly suffer from critical conditions, from death. So if we really wish to cope with the COVID-19 crisis, we really must improve health and longevity. We really must intervene into the degenerative aging process. And we've been trying to advocate for this point. Recently published a paper others advocating for these points. We didn't write this paper for our academic interest. We wrote it specifically to address to the general public, to decision makers. Listen, if you're interested in COVID, if you want to combat this crisis and defeat it, you must also deal with the age problem and try to improve health and longevity. Is it possible to intervene into aging to improve health and longevity? Yes, it is possible. There are many proofs of principle from animal models, but also from some emerging human trials. This is the classification by the American National Institute of Health, the so-called NIH Neuroscience Interest Group. They came up with a set of aging processes that can be targeted, such as metabolism, inflammation, epigenetic changes, adaptation to stress. And there are proofs of principle that with specific therapeutic interventions, genetic, pharmacological, physical, this aging process can be targeted, can be intervened into, and in this way, age-related disease can be postponed. So it is our goal as longevity advocates, longevity research advocates, to bring these developments to the clinic as fast as possible to shorten the pathway, of course, in a reliable, responsible way, to shorten the pathway between a lab and the clinic. Also important to note that we not only advocate for developing therapies, we also advocate for developing diagnostics. These two go hand in hand. You cannot treat something that you cannot diagnose. So diagnostics and therapies are kind of two sides of the same coin, but it is also important to emphasize that we need reliable actionable biomarkers of aging in order to, first of all, to predict the risks for the elderly population, and also to test the effectiveness and safety of particular anti-aging or longevity promoting intervention. Part of advocacy. Just a couple of projects that I was involved in from the more scientific side, illustrating the importance of intervention into aging. For example, once again, in relation to COVID, recently together with some colleagues from China, from the Institute for Stem Cell Research, I was happy enough to co-author on a paper that showed that by mesenchymal stem cells, you can improve the survival of COVID-19, of severe COVID-19 patients. Why? Because it could help restore the immune balance, could subdue the cytokine storm. And how is this related to aging? We know that aging is manifested by the so-called immunosenescence, impairment of the immune function, which on the one hand reduces the resistance to infection. On the other hand, if overstimulated, it can go to overdrive, and actually people don't die from the virus; they die from the reaction of the immune system. With therapies like stem cells, we are able not just to improve aging, but also to combat multiple age-related diseases, including COVID. So this is an illustration of how the aging and disease are connected and can be intervened. On the side of diagnostics, I've been involved in some research, some approaches to measure multimorbidity. So it is important that we diagnose, that we predict not just a particular disease, but their synergistic cumulative effect, because in aging there are multiple diseases at once. That's a hallmark of aging, that you have to actually add multiple diseases at once. So we also try to advance this kind of thinking, this topic, into the European Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging as well. But once again, I'm not exactly a scientist or half a scientist or half-time scientist. I'm mostly an advocate and mostly an activist for the longevity field. So it is important to make people realize that from such interventions, from some preventive intervention to aging, we can also obtain huge benefits for the society, for the savings for the healthcare system, welfare system. Basically, if we really want economic growth without impairment of the quality of life, we really need to promote health and longevity. And who should be interested in these points? Basically, everybody, the general public, pharmaceutical and medical technology, health insurance, life insurance, regulators and policymakers, scientists and students, they all should be made aware of the importance of aging research, of intervention to aging, and thus promoting health and longevity. It should be made everybody's business. Great. Now we understand that the field is feasible, that we can actually intervene into aging to promote health and longevity on the scientific side. We also understand that it is desirable if we really want our society to prosper as well as ourselves as individuals. We must extend our health and longevity, ameliorate our degenerative aging process. If it is both desirable and feasible, the next step is action. What do we actually do to achieve something that we desire and something that we believe is possible? Like any social movement, if you believe that some social change must be made, you create a social movement, you advocate, you educate, in short, you become involved in activism. And that's what we have been trying to advance. The longevity activism can be advanced at every level, from the international level to the individual level. At the international level, we need to be aware of certain policy frameworks that can be supportive of aging research, and first of all, make those policy documents more accessible, educate about those documents to the decision makers, and also, if possible, influence those documents that they are even more supportive of aging and longevity research, and of course advocate for their implementation, so they don't just remain on paper. I just highlighted there are many frameworks, of course, that can be relevant. I highlighted a couple of frameworks that were somewhat influenced by longevity activism, by longevity advocacy. First of all, the recent inclusion of aging modifier, the qualifier into the international classification, thanks to the work of science and another initiative back in 2017 with involvement of many organizations, International Society on Aging in Disease and ILA and LIF, and actually hundreds of organizations advocated for the inclusion of aging into the WHO work program until 2023. Can you imagine, it wasn't in the program, but thanks to longevity advocacy it was included. Now the question, after 3 years, the question is how much of it is implemented, how much WHO is actually involved in aging research and development. Not much, but at least it shows the feasibility of influencing global public and thanks to advocacy. Also, very important to advocate at the national level, as most funding and most research is done at the national level. So here is an example of the position paper of the International Society on Aging and Disease, advocating for the critical need to promote research of aging to improve health and longevity of the population. Some of the suggestions, some of the policy suggestions include improving funding, improving incentives for the field, improving institutional support, basically meaning that more institutions are become involved in the field. It was translated to 12 languages, submitted to several governments, quoted over 150 times in scientific literature. So this kind of documents, but that's a little old, it's from 2015. More documents like this should be created and brought to the attention of decision makers. Still, most of the advocacy work takes place at the grassroots level. The main unit of advocacy is an NGO, a non-governmental or non-profit organization, and we need to develop such NGOs in every country, possibly multiple NGOs, and if they already exist, we need to cultivate them. In many cases, they are registered and then do very little, let's say, for various reasons. Still, if we need effective longevity research advocacy, we need to cultivate to support those organizations, and I'm not just talking to activists themselves, but also to potential supporters. Understand that if they really, people who are already willing to support the longevity field, they should just invest in actual R&D projects. They should also invest in building the ecosystem. Help the R&D as well. For example, some of the goals of our Israeli association, like education, awareness, communication, support, analysis, and data processing. But of course, every organization, every other country can adopt its own goals to assist the development of the longevity field. And still, at the individual level, we don't have to wait for the governments to adopt those goals. So we don't have to even to join some massive movement. Each of us can do his or her own part, become interested in research, educate oneself, join with others, even in small groups, or working groups, or study groups. Donate as much as possible. Have money, you can do time or lobby and support relevant legislation. And most importantly, please be healthy, practice a healthy life, prolonging lifestyle. Most of the things that people know, because it is important to stay healthy and live long enough to live even longer until effective therapies are emerging. So once again, the main parts of longevity are clear: the feasibility, the desirability, and even some suggestions for action. Now, does it work? Does our advocacy effort are creating any effect in the real world? Is anybody living longer? Is more research done thanks to longevity and advocacy? First of all, the whole field of longevity advocacy is quite young. Probably 10 or 15 years, it's more or less on the radar as a global social movement. So it may be too early to demand very concrete results. And also, we must admit it hasn't been developing and growing as much as we could. So I believe we should be at least as a larger movement as the green movement. Still, this is not happening for various reasons that I'm not going to enter. But still, there are some encouraging developments. There are some initiatives that were promoted. These are some of the initiatives that where I had the honor to participate. To become involved, first of all, writing some position papers, such as the critical need to promote research of aging that I already mentioned. Also, the longevity dividend, the initiative back from 2006 by Professor Alshansky and colleagues that really brought awareness about aging research to a higher level, and also had the honor to be one of the signatories on this document back in 2006. Also, there is the Geroscience International Geroscience Interest Group that conducted a series of conferences last year. Also was happy to help organize a conference of this group in Israel. There was also a conference in December with the affiliation to UNESCO as part of the Silk Road project in China, in Beijing. And of course, the Longevity Day, the Longevity Month initiative that we have been advancing at least for 7 years since 2013 is also helping to bring many people to the cause. Hundreds of events were organized in dozens of countries, so it's a good excuse. You know, if anybody was interested, it's good excuse to really bring this point to public interest, to public agenda, as well as organize some events and promotions. And by the way, speaking about longevity advocacy, Longevity Month this year, there's even a prize, about $3,000 from the International Longevity Alliance for the best event, for the best or the best longevity promotion this month. So you're welcome to submit and report about it. So great. So all these initiatives, you know, in the end, what did we achieve? Once again, we cannot brag too much. There's too many impediments for this advocacy. Not just the little resources of our community, the little resources of our movement, also the general. I wouldn't say opposition. I would say rather lethargy or inertia that is not so receptive to these ideas, and also the actual research institutes, I believe, they could benefit from some optimizing, from more efficient work. But still, there's some achievements. For example, as I mentioned, in 2017, we were able to include aging into the WHO work program. We were able to, longevity advocates were able to include aging ICD, and these examples give hope that with more efforts we can achieve more effect on policy international level. And on the national level, I can report from Israel that we have also been trying to do our best, thanks to the efforts in collaboration with colleagues from the Disabled and Half a Person Association, together with the Israeli Longevity Alliance and Vetek Association, the Movement for Longevity and Quality of Life. Were able to include the topic of research, development, and education for health, longevity, and prevention of age-related disease into Israel National Master Plan on Aging. I must sadly say that thanks to the situation with the COVID, with the political situation in Israel as well, it wasn't implemented much. But still, we're hopeful that at least as a strategic area, it exists and then can be developed later on. Still, we were able to achieve a few calls for research proposals. For example, the call for joint project between Israel and the UK, the so-called BIREX Aging, the Britain-Israel Research and Academic Research of Aging. A few million pounds they dedicate. Also some calls from the Ministry of Science, also a few billions. Still, it's in the ocean, as we say. Still, every little support counts. So hopefully, all these efforts will combine together and lead to stronger support of longevity research. I must also mention that we advanced this not just in Israel, but also internationally. There was an initiative, a petition signed by several prominent aging researchers to support aging research in India, signed by Professor Kalluri Rao and Professor Gadar and many other leading aging researchers from India, and hopefully there will be more advocacy also in India, so together we can advance the field globally and enjoy its fruits, enjoy the actual therapies, the actual diagnostic. Once again, thank you for organizing this event.
Thank you, Ilia. That's really a lot of things to know about going on with. There are a few questions. One of the questions from Siddharth. It's quite a policy related question. He's asking that will longevity research will become a profit research in coming time?
That depends. You know, there are already companies that are involved in longevity research and development, and they're doing fine. Hundreds of millions are raised for the field. Even companies like Calico. The question, will they actually make money? It just depends on whether they're able to develop therapies. That's the big question. If we're able to develop therapies, then the field will be profitable and the entire society is profit. But that's the same bet as with publicly funded research. If we're successful, we win. If we're not successful, well.
Thank you. And I also have one question in very general, because I am in contact with you since 2013. And since then, I'm seeing you and ILA, International Longevity Alliance, and also your own in Israel, lots of policy intervention and also lots of advocacy toward WHO, toward other different countries. Do you see any feedback from them? I mean, do you see any changes happening there? Is any impact? Do you see any impact so far?
Yeah, that was kind of my point. You know, first of all, we ourselves as a movement were too small and too weak to make a movement, make a strong impact. So if we want an impact, we need to strengthen ourselves, build up associations, build up the movement everywhere, become more active. You know, a lot of us have jobs. You know, we cannot advocate too strongly for this cause. We really want more influence. We really need to become more active ourselves. And also on the side of the society, you know, still there is resistance. But I can tell you, you know, compared to 15 years ago, to the beginning of the internet forum, like Immortality Institute, there's no comparison. It's almost mainstream, the field. Back then, we just talked a few people between ourselves. Now we talk with the governments. It's everywhere on the internet, it's everywhere in the newspapers. So it's much more accepted. And there are some emerging, impacts. You know, we see that WHO is accepting it as at least, you know, on paper as a program, but still we need more. It's never enough. It's never enough. If we really want some therapies, we need to do more and more and more, and that way we improve our chance.
Okay, sounds
right.
Sounds a little bit.
I
Yes.
have a question.
Yeah, please, Sarah, go ahead.
So basically, yeah, my question, okay, thanks again, Ilia, for your presentation. It was a wonderful presentation. I have a question which is quite in relation with Siddharth's, the previous question. as a longevity activist, when we are talking about NGOs and non-profit organizations and advocacy level, how do you see, like, you know, all these technologies being used by the capitalistic society, I mean, for companies, for profit, is like longevity for all? Like, how can we approach this issue that if we have certain technological interventions one day soon, how can we assure that it is not being, you know, capitalized and it is being available to all? So that's what my question is.
Thank you. Wonderful question. Yes, it's a major point of concern. Some people say, okay, let's just give it all to the market. The market will decide. No, I don't believe it is the right way to act, because if market decides, you can have no assurance that it will not really monopolize, or that it will only be available to the very small part of the population. I believe that the actual solution is to once again to advocate for publicly supported research, development, and application programs. Because if we as people advocate for those programs and they're established, we have the entitlement to use them, because we voted them. It's our public money. I believe that's the solution. But once again, it depends on us. If we are active, if we're really able to influence policy and in exactly this way, to ensure the public entitlement for the results, then it happens. If not, in the best case, it will be monopolized. In the worst case, it will simply not be available. By the way, some of these points are also in some of those petitions I mentioned. I just put it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ilia. Thank you again. That's very informative, of course, always.
Right.
And thanks again for your talk and your